Cool. All right, I'm just going to give Kathy Victor the power to record. Okay, I'll put it on board and we'll start with obesity. Yeah, exactly. Is it this? Yeah. All right, guys. So page 12, we're going to begin with obeisance to Manjushri. To Manjushri, all the scriptural text and all things is understanding shine forth as the sun and clouded by the firmaments of traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways for the patient as well. All creatures caught in the prison of samsara, overwhelmed by this. Use dragon thunder proclamation for Dhamma, Rajasanders to perform iron chains of outcome. Suffering where various powers appear. The darkness of all ignorance. Ritual Manjushri, whose principal bodies adorn with the one. The highest perfection for Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning. Manjushri, O loving one, with your brings of your wisdom, illuminating the darkness of the mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, so that I gain insight into the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. Chodan Sogi Chonam La Chanchu Badu Dani Kyasuchi Dagi Chushagi Betsonagi Rola Penji Sangue Rupa Chodan Sogi Chonam La Chanchu Badu Dani Kyasuchi Dagi Chushagi Betsonagi Penji Sangue Rupa Chodan Sogi Chonam La Chanchu Badu Dani Kyasuchi Dagi Chushagi Betsonagi Dola Penji Sangue Rupa. All right. I see that there is no, people were freaking out about having no sound. Can you hear me at home? All right. Chris is nodding his head. Yeah. Jason is saying yes. All right. You haven't missed much, kind of just my silly banter. All right. So what I thought of doing today was to clarify one point with respect to the discussion that we had yesterday of single entity. I listened to the first 10 minutes of the discussion just to get an idea of whether, you know, there's some crucial doubts or points that I had to clarify. So there was kind of one thing that occurred to me that I wanted to clarify. I didn't listen to the rest, so you might have had like a really fruitful discussion. But if you have any questions arising from your discussion, we can definitely do that. What I thought of doing on top of that is to look at the business of guarding ethics and try to bring up a few points and discuss it with you guys at home and also the people that are here today, so that maybe we can clarify some of the doubts that we have and also introduce some new doubts.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Well, you know, the thing is that I think that sometimes the more you study, the more you learn, the more you go deeper into scripture, the more kind of things pop up in your mind. And even if currently you cannot be absolutely clear about what the answers are, at least you know where your doubts are. So I had a doubt or a question that occurred to me when I was preparing for the tute. I couldn't answer it. I sent the question to Geshe Jameng, who is currently at his home place in Tibet. So I brought my phone, and if he's going to reply during the tute, I'm just going to listen to his answer, and we'll have an online update. So anyway, so Jana is, did you say Jana or Jane? Jane, sorry. I called you by the wrong name, so sorry, Jane. I think that Jane had a question yesterday, which I neglected to answer. I think it was something about Dhammakaya, Sambhogakaya. I can't remember what the question was. If it's still valid, then Jen, maybe you can post it again on the chat. But we'll start with what I wanted to clarify from single entity or not. So yesterday I said that to begin with, we can distinguish the way that things are different from each other. So we're dealing with phenomena that are multiple, not a single phenomenon, but we take two things and juxtapose them to see whether they're different or whether they're actually the same. So I said that things can be different by name, they can be different by meaning, or they can be different by name and meaning. So that was like a prelude, a preliminary to discussing single entity. Now, with respect to things that are different by meaning but not by name, like for example, we have a few Tuptens here today, right? So we have Tupten. What's your other name? Lawson Tupten. All right. So we have Lawson Tupten, Tupten Dechen, Tupten Churing, Tupten Churki. So we have, a few Tuptens here. When I pointed each one of them, I pointed different things. So these Tuptens are not single entity. They're things that have the same name. They have different meaning, and also they are not a single entity. So I just wanted to clarify that. Now, sorry? That's got clarified. Okay, thank you. I stopped before you clarify that. Thank you. Now things can be different by name, but have the same meaning. Like as we said yesterday, Dechen and Tupten. Sorry, Molly and Tupten Dechen are different names, same meaning. They're Tupten, Dechen, and Molly are a single entity. A person and their emptiness are a single entity. So we have different names, different meanings, but a single entity. The person and the aggregates are a single entity, right? So we haven't mentioned that yesterday. So we have the 5 aggregates: the body, the physical aggregate, feeling, discrimination, composition, factors, and consciousness. The person and the aggregates are different names, different meanings, they're different objects, but they're a single entity. Wherever you point at the aggregate, there we will point at the person. Wherever you point at the person, you point there at the aggregates. They're a single entity. Now, when I say that wherever you point it, it's not the definition of single entity. This is not what you find in a philosophical text, but it's more like, I think, a general explanation. It doesn't work in all cases because there are things that he cannot really point at physically, like, for example, the mind and its emptiness, right? So the mind is not a physical thing, so you cannot point at it and say that this is where the mind is. But I can point, for example, at Venerable Chewing, and I said, this is where the person is. So this is also where the mind would be, although it's not I'm pointing at your mind, because the mind is not a physical thing. So that's the clarification that I wanted to make with respect to yesterday. Now, let's begin with, I'll just read through Jane's question and see if we start with that. Under the advice to abandon negativity as an accomplished virtue, it is said that 1, we need to have cultivated merits in past lives, and 2, together with the blessings of the Buddha. How does Buddha help us with his blessing? So actually, this is something that I did want to bring up today. But in order to do that, let's quickly look at the outline for the text. So, I think that it's here. Not this, not this, not this. Is it this? Not this. This. All right. So try to minimize this. So we started to look at point 3b, the actual explanation of the states of the path. First of all, we had an exhortation to the reader to take the essence of the basis of leisures and endowments. Then there was a whole explanation about what it means. Then today we started with explaining how to take the essence. Now, with explaining how to take the essence, the first point was a general presentation, and then an explanation of each topic individually. Now, when we explained the reflecting on the benefits of cultivating bodhicitta, the first point is explaining the chapter's material, and then instructions on the reasoning behind abandoning negativities and practicing virtue, which is this thing. So just as a flash of lightning brightly illuminates for an instant within the clouds on a dark night, likewise in this world, through the might of the Buddha, merit and intelligence occasionally occur for once. Hence, virtue is perpetually feeble. So here, verse 5 and the first line from verse 6, both of them fit at the heading of instructions on the reasoning behind abandoning negativities and practicing virtue. So it mentions that merit and intelligence, or the ability to think of a particular thing, occur for once through the might of the Buddha. So there are different ways of reading this verse. In looking at the other commentary that Geshe-la mentioned, the commentary that was composed by Khenpo Kunpel, it's also available in English. We have the book in our library. It's called The Essence of Manjusri's Speech, as Jampa pointed out. We also have at least the first 5 chapters translated into English in the commentary. It's the same text. I think that probably an earlier translation was used in order to come up with the book of The Essence of Manjusri's Speech. But anyway, the first 5 chapters are available for free from the translator's website. So I can't remember if we posted it on. I'll ask Kathy Victor. Maybe I'll send an email to Kathy Victor. She shared the link. Okay. All right, I'll share the link here. So anyway, I'll also send an email to Kathy Victor and ask her maybe to send an email to everyone with a link to the translator's website. It says that it allows people to download it. So no, we don't preach copyright restrictions. So anyway, in this commentary, in Kunpel's commentary, it is said that we have, when we look at the physical and mental basis for developing bodhicitta, we look at 2 things. First of all, we have a precious human body with freedoms and opportunities, which is a physical basis for developing bodhicitta. So you find the topic of a precious human body. We normally in English, we say a precious human life, a precious human rebirth. In Tibetan language, they call it the body. The body itself is precious because it supports an intelligent consciousness. It's not a major point, but sometimes it's kind of good it's nice to think about it like that. It gives you another angle, another perspective of why this body is very important to us. We don't want to abuse it. We don't want to, kill ourselves or what have you. It's like this body is precious because it supports an intelligent consciousness. And if we have freedoms and opportunities, we can use it in a particular way. So when you look at the Lamrim text, the meditation on freedoms and opportunities comes as a preliminary for training the mind in the sense of the path of beings from the 3 scopes. So first of all, in the Lamrim, a general Lamrim text, it is divided into 2 main sections. When you look at how to train the mind with the actual instructions, the first point is the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher. And the second point is having relied upon a spiritual teacher, or while relying on a spiritual teacher, the stages of training one's mind. So when you look at the stages of training one's mind, the first point is an exhortation to make the most out of a life of freedoms and opportunities. So you understand how you have 8 freedoms, 10 opportunities, how they're of great advantage, how difficult it is to obtain that, and how they're easily lost. And then when you understand that and you become so intent to make the most out of this lifetime, then you think the way to do it is to train my mind along the steps of the path of the 3 scopes being. So you begin with the steps of the path that are shared with those of the small scope. So this is how you find it in the Lamrim text. Here in our text, the exhortation is made to make the most out of our freedoms and opportunity, and then we go straight into the great scope, into the development of bodhicitta. After all, this is the subject matter of Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life. But today, in one of the sections that we read, it said that in the general explanation of how to extract the essence, it says that you do need to train your mind along the steps of the path that are shared with those of the small scope and the medium scope. Geshe gave a really nice explanation of the points, some of the points that come in the steps of the path of the small and the medium scope. So you do need to train your mind in those stages, but the subject matter of this treatise is bodhicitta and the 6 perfections. So we don't have a lot of explanation of the other stages here, but they will come up in Shantideva's text. Anyway, so we have an exhortation. Then we said that the physical basis, you recognize that you have the physical basis for the development of bodhicitta. But the other commentary says that you can also appreciate the mental basis that you have, not only the physical basis, but also the mental basis. So what is the mental basis? The mental basis is those occurrences, those rare occurrences of virtue that occur to us. So because we have those occurrences of virtue, and because they're so rare, the text says, use them, don't let them sleep, but use them also as a basis for the development of bodhicitta. That would be the best way that you can use them in cultivating bodhicitta. So Kunsen, maybe I'll put the text, I'll try to find the point in his text and put it on the screen, so bear with me for a second.
Is that the one that you downloaded, that in the 5 parts?
Yeah.
So which part are you there, part 1?
That's the first one. So I'll share it with the people at home. All right. So in explaining that verse 5, it says, second, for example, just as a flash of lightning at night, when the sun is absent, during the pitch black darkness, when there is no moon amidst cloud banks, when there are no stars, for an instant reveals brightly illuminates shapes. In the same way as in this example, at night when the wisdom sun of the omniscient one is not shining, during the pitch black darkness in which one does not know what to do and what to avoid, and amidst cloud banks of obscurations that cover the mind with the 5 or 3 poisons, then occasionally, for the might of the 2 combined powers. So what are they? And this is directly what Jane is asking. The power of the light rays of bodhicitta and the aspirations of the Buddha, the Bhagavan, that's the first power. And the second is the power of merit that beings have previously accumulated for themselves. Only then the wish or the thought of accomplishing what is meritorious of virtues arises in the minds of ordinary worldly people, minds which are generally obscured by the pitch black darkness of ignorance and then only briefly or rarely, suggesting one thought out of 100 or two out of 1,000. So again, this section in the other commentary explains the mental basis for the development of bodhicitta. So it says that the mental basis is those rare occasions of virtue, which are facilitated by two powers. One of them is through the might of the Buddha, or through the blessings of the Buddha. And the second part is our own merit. So Jen's question refers to, it says, it was said that one, we need to have cultivated merits in past lifetimes, and two, together with the blessings of the Buddha. How does Buddha help us with his blessings? So it is an interesting topic. In the unsurpassed continuum, which is one of the 5 Dhammas of Maitreya, one of the 5 texts that Maitreya composed, he spoke about the Buddha's enlightened activities, right? So Buddhas attain the state of enlightenment, and then there is an uninterrupted, spontaneous flow of enlightened activities that Buddhas emanate. And what Maitreya suggests in his text is that every virtue in our mind is an illustration of Buddha's activity. So any virtue that we have in our mind is a Buddha's enlightened activity. Now, he provides also a proof for that, which to be honest, I can't remember now at the tip of my fingers. I have to look it up. But there is also an explanation why every virtue that we have in our mind is the Buddha's enlightened activity. I'll look at it today and I'll bring it tomorrow also just for discussion. Even I think that this material is quite complicated, but still I think that gives you something to think about. Again, you put it at the back, if you understand it now, it's good. If not, kind of, that you've had it before. At some point you will be able to make the connection. So it's good also to introduce those points. So every virtue that we have, that we do, that we think of, is a Buddha's enlightened activity. Which means that first of all, we say that the Buddha's mind pervades every phenomena, right? Do you agree with that the Buddha's mind pervades everything? The Buddha's mind not only is omniscient, it is omnipresent. It pervades all phenomena. So what is the meaning of pervading all phenomena? No, what is the meaning of a Buddha's mind pervading all phenomena?
Well, you can see and say he comes across a piece of wood, you can tell exactly where each particle of the wood came from. And by doing that with people, he can then teach to people exactly what they need to hear to develop on the path.
So Tupten is saying that, like, for example, if a Buddha's mind sees a piece of wood, then the Buddha knows, not only sees that piece of wood, but knows each of the bit particles, or if each of the particles that this piece of wood is made of, where did they come from, and so forth. Also, the Buddha's mind knows the disposition of each and every sentient beings. All right. Chris is saying that it perceives all, it perceives everything. So I agree with both of you, with Chris and with Tupten. Also, we say that, to add to that, we can also say that wherever a Buddha's mind is, there you will also find a Buddha's body. For a Buddha reached the union of body and mind. So it's different to us in the sense that, for example, I can think of the beach at Malulaba, but I'm still here. For a Buddha has reached a union of body and mind. And wherever the mind of a Buddha is, there you will also find a Buddha's body. So it's pretty kind of mind-blowing, isn't it? Kind of, it's hard to think of what the meaning of that. But I can probably mention a couple of points in relation to that again will give us something to think about. So for those of you who are reading or have read The King of Prayers, he said that on every atom there is a Buddha or myriad Buddhas surrounded by Bodhisattvas and so forth. So how is it possible? Well, it is possible because a Buddha has this union of body and mind. A Buddha knows all phenomena. Wherever a Buddha's mind is, there you will also find a Buddha's body. So that's one point that you can link up to it. Another point that you can link to it is that according to the Mahayana explanation, when a Bodhisattva reaches the first ground, they attain a body in the nature of mind. It is called a mental body, a body in the nature of mind. Now, it is not that the body is mind. They attain a body in the nature of mind. What it is exactly, it's hard to understand. It's hard to understand I think that with our limited understanding, when we're used to just having this physical coarse body. When Bodhisattvas reach the path of seeing, when they get a perceptual realization of emptiness, the body starts to transform. The body becomes a body in the nature of mind. So along the 10 grounds, from ground 1, 2 through ground number 10, there's that process of transformation in which the Bodhisattva purifies the mind. And together with the mind, this body in the nature of mind continues until they get to the state of enlightenment. They attain the state of enlightenment in which they have a union of body and mind. So Chris is saying, but then there would be no room for other physical things. A Bodhisattva on the first ground has a body in the nature of mind. So this idea of physicality or no room for other things start to dissipate even before that. So wherever a Buddha's mind is, there you will also find a Buddha's body. Wherever you find a Buddha's body, you'll also find Buddha's enlightened activities. So a Buddha knows our minds, right? A Buddha knows perceptually the mind of each and every one of us. Not only that, you could say that wherever the Buddha's omniscient mind is, a Buddha's omniscient mind knows everything perceptually, not through thinking, but through directly meeting with an object. So a Buddha directly sees our mind. The Buddha's, you could say, not only the Buddha directly sees that, the Buddha's body is also here together with us. So maybe you can think about that. Every virtue that is enacted in my mind is a manifestation of Buddha's activity. I mean, this is, I think that just kind of is maybe a simple way of looking at that, but I promise to look more at the unsurpassed continuum and see whether it can be explained in a more precise way. How a Buddha's, we're thinking now, we are now discussing how our virtuous activities or our meritorious activities come through two powers. One of them is through the blessings of the Buddha. So the Buddha's Dhammakaya is always present. It always engages in enlightened activities, even within our own mind. And then through having accumulated merit in the past, that's the second part, occasionally we have those virtuous states of mind. It's actually, I found this, I find this sometimes to be quite confronting when Geshe-la and also when other teachers say that virtue is so rare. We have seldom those virtuous state of mind. It sounds quite confronting because, sometimes I think of a passing day and I think of myself, actually, maybe I have more than that. I wake up in the morning, I then do some meditation. I go to, you guys sometimes do practices here at the Gompa. We have evening prayers and, we go to classes and so forth. It sounds as if actually we have more going on, right?
Yeah, you would think.
Yeah.
You would hope,
Yeah. What do you feel the same?
Yeah, I agree.
Chewing, kind of, you seem a bit reluctant. Sorry?
I feel the same. That we are always. It's wonderful to think of to do virtuous things, and to think that the Buddha is always there. Yeah, but they are around here.
Yeah, they are around here. Yeah.
Yes.
I was just saying it would really be with me as a complete action. you know, with meditation and everything, and then dedicating at the end, you know.
So,
it would be lost.
So Tupten is saying that you're thinking that, you know, in terms of performing a complete path of action, in terms of the motivation, the preparatory part, the concluding part of the action is completely fulfilled, you know, so that's very difficult for that to come together. No, I think that probably I mean, it's quite interesting kind of, it seems that we can identify some moments throughout the day where we had virtuous state of mind. Yeah, they do occur. But I think that probably, you know, in some sense you can say that our situation is quite special because our mind is already turned towards the Dhamma. Now, our mind is already turned toward the Dhamma. We already have some invested interest in listening to those teachings, thinking about them, trying to meditate and so forth. So it might occur more for us. And still, when you try to quantify it, you know, in terms of how many moments do we actually do it throughout the day, you know, I sleep for 7 hours or sometimes 8 hours a day. So, you know, 1/3 of the day is kind of strike it out. Then, you know, times for cooking food and taking a shower and doing kind of, you know, just like browsing through YouTube or, you know, looking at the news and so forth. I waste quite a lot of time, or, you know, spend some time on unnecessary things. And yes, I do some meditation, I do some contemplation, but I think that as Tupten said, if I try to think whether that was an action in which all the 3 parts of an action were concluded, are found in a complete sense, it's quite hard to think that all of them are there in a complete way. So anyway, going back to the original question, Jen asked, what is the kind of, what is the thing of the Buddha? Well, the Buddha's Dhammakaya is always engaging our minds, you know, in ensuing or sending forth enlightened activities, and also dependent upon merit that we have accumulated before. We have those occasions in which we have virtue, even more kind of maybe more, even more seldom occasions in which virtue becomes powerful due to the completion of the 3 parts of an action. So this is the mental basis for the development of bodhicitta. So there were a couple of points, maybe 3 or 4 points that I missed in the chat, so I'll read through them. So Jason is saying, are you talking about the subtle energy body when talking about the mental body? Well, we never had an explanation of what this mental body is. So I think that subtle energy body is something that is coming more from the tantric perspective, right? In High-Sangha Tantra, we speak of the wind energy. But this presentation of a body and the nature of mind is a sutra presentation. So in sutra, there is no presentation of the wind element that supports the consciousness. So we can't really speak about it as subtle energy body. All right, so then Chris is saying, can you define a Buddha body? A Buddha body, a Buddha body, I don't know if there is a dictionary definition to that. I can't remember coming across one, but there is a definition for a body. A body is a collection of multiple parts. So a Buddha's body is a Buddha's collection of multiple parts. So the historical had a physical body, but presumable Buddha's body in this context, mental, etc. I think you defined it as mental. I think I've got it now. Well, keep in mind that when we spoke about this chart of the Buddha bodies, the emptiness of the mind of Buddha is a Buddha body. It is emptiness. It is permanent. It is a Buddha body. The Dhammakaya, exalted knowledge Dhammakaya, is a Buddha's mind. It's not a physical body, but it's a body, a Buddha body. The Sambhogakaya is not a physical body, it's a person. It is a Buddha person, an Arya Buddha that teaches Arya Bodhisattvas. So it's a person, but they're still called a Buddha body. right? So here we need to kind of set aside for the time being the understanding of body as being like just this physical thing that we have, and to think about it as a collection of different things, which are Buddhas. All right. Kerry is saying, for me, sometimes I think I'm doing something of virtue, yet if I look deeper, there can be other motivation, including attachment, etc. Yeah. Yeah. I am with you on that. All right. So we had so another thing that I wanted to bring on to our discussion today was the ethical discipline that we spoke of today. Now, so how did we end up speaking about ethical discipline, ethics? Well, going back to verse 4, which is an exhortation to make the most out of our freedoms and opportunities, or leisures and endowments, we said that there are 4 main points to the meditation, right? So recognizing freedoms and endowments, how they are of great advantage, and then the difficulty in finding freedoms and endowments, or freedoms and opportunities. So the difficulty is explained in a variety of ways. You can see how difficult it is to find freedoms and opportunities when you think of the causes that produce them. So when you see how difficult it is to gather the causes, you understand that the result is hard to come by. That's one way. Another way is to think about it in terms of an analogy. So sometimes they say that it is, I think that the common analogy is this blind turtle that lives at the bottom of the ocean. They come up to the surface every 100 years and they stick the neck through a yoke that is floating adrift on the surface of the ocean. That's one analogy. Sometimes they say that it is like the chance that if you flick a needle, that it will land on the tip of the needle and stay there. Or if you flick a pea, then it will stand kind of in the air. It will be, you'll be able to make it land at the top of a needle and make it stand upright. So kind of those analogies that illustrate an impossible situation. I mean, it's still kind of possible for it to happen, but it's probably like winning the lottery. However small the chance is. So that's one way of kind of understanding it by means of analogies. And then another one is by speaking about the nature. And when you speak about the nature, or the essence of freedoms and opportunities, you can think about it in terms of numbers. For example, they say that you can compare the number of human beings in this world to the number of hell beings and pretas, which we don't see them. So how can we quantify that? Well, we can get a sense of human beings comparing to animals, ants, insects, and so forth. So yeah, we can say that there is a growth in the number of people in this world, right? We've been, 4 billion once upon a time. Now we're 6-7 billion people. So obviously the numbers are increasing. It doesn't mean to say that they're increasing in terms of a precious human body. They're increasing in terms of at least human rebirth, but not necessarily as a precious human rebirth, right? So we can understand it in terms of numbers. How many people live in this world? How many of them are interested in the Dharma? How many of them are interested? How many of them were just born into a Buddhist culture and not necessarily interested in Buddhism? And how many of them have a genuine interest in Buddhism? How many of them meet qualified spiritual teacher? How many of them find the opportunity to study? It's not hard to find the opportunities to study. We all know that. Those of you, I live here, and many of us live here, and we have the opportunity to attend the study program. But those of you at home, you know better than me how hard it is to make the time to study the Dharma, and practice the Dharma. It's much harder than I think for me as a monastic. So we can understand how rare this opportunity is. But anyway, we said that one way of understanding the difficulty is in thinking of the causes that produce these freedoms, the body that we have with freedoms and opportunities. Keshe Jaman sent me a question, so send me an answer, so maybe I'll listen to it soon. But so we said that there are three causes for producing a precious human body with freedoms and opportunities. But before we get to them, we say that we make a distinction between a mere birth as a human being and being born as a human being with freedoms and opportunities. Do you remember that we made that distinction? So we've made a distinction. So to be born just as a human being, what do you need to do? Practice ethics. Yeah, like one bit of ethics. And to have a precious human body with freedoms and opportunities, you need to have guarded pure ethical discipline, right? So not just ethics. You need to have done it perfectly, to have guarded perfect ethical discipline. You need to have supplemented up with the practice of the 6 perfections. And at the end, you need to have linked it up with making stainless aspirations. Right? So in this way, we first of all we not only distinguish between a mere birth as a human being, we not only distinguish between being born just as a human being and human being with freedoms and opportunities, we also distinguish between the causes for them. The causes for being born just as a human being is to keep one bit of ethical discipline, whereas to be born with freedoms and opportunities, you need those 3 causes. To have guarded perfect ethical discipline, pure ethical discipline, to have supplemented up with the practice of the 6 perfections, and to have supplemented up with the practice of the 6 perfections. When you think of, and you need to have connected it at the end with making stainless aspirations. So when you think of people that do not have freedoms and opportunities, then at least human beings that are not being born just as a human being and not with freedoms and opportunities, well, I think that you can first of all think of some that have physical or intellectual disabilities that prevent them from studying and reflecting. I think that that's probably quite easy to see that they're in a disadvantageous situation. They don't have those freedoms and opportunities. This is not to say that that we look down on them. It's basically we just recognize. We use that reflection in order to recognize, in order to motivate ourselves to make the most out of this situation, not to look down on others in that sense. Anyway, so then when I think of the 5 opportunities that pertain to oneself, being born as a human being, being born in a central land, which means that the 4 retinues of a Buddha are found or complete. Now, so this is interesting. I was born in Israel. The 4 retinues of Buddha are certainly not there. We live here in Australia. Do we have the 4 retinues of Buddha here in Australia? Yeah, you can say we do. What are those 4 retinues? There are novice nuns, fully ordained monks, and fully ordained nuns. I think that there are novices, but maybe since you raised that doubt, this is something that I need to clarify. Thank you. So I think that I think that there are novice monks and nuns, but I'll clarify that. So, by the way, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, which for up until now, the lineage of fully ordained nuns haven't made it. It's not there in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. You might wonder, how then are Tibetans considered to be those that have freedoms and opportunities if in Tibet they don't have the 4 lineages, the 4 retinues of Buddha? So the way that Tibetans solve it is to say that, well, even if they don't have a living tradition of fully ordained nuns, still the teachings of fully ordained nuns, teachings on ordination procedure or the vows and so forth, do exist in their tradition, and therefore they can take that to be the existence of that lineage. This is how Tibetans, at least some Tibetans, explain that. Anyway, but when you look at the 5 opportunities pertaining to oneself, so being born in a central land, that's the meaning of that, having those 4 retinues of Buddha, having complete sense faculties, having not transgressed the limits of actions, which means that I have not done one of the 5 actions without an intervening period, which means I haven't killed my mother and father, luckily. I think that when I was a teenager, I was thinking about it kind of, but luckily I haven't kind of acted upon that thought. So, you know, I haven't killed my mother and father. I haven't killed an arhat. I haven't drawn a blood from a Tathagata. And also, I hope so, that I haven't created a division in the Sangha. That's the 5th action without intervening period. You know, so I haven't done that. But what about, you know, what about having faith in the 3 baskets of teachings? I have faith. My sister doesn't have faith. All my family doesn't have faith in the scriptures of the Buddha, in the 3 trainings. So they don't have freedoms and opportunities in that sense. They're missing on them. So in that sense, you can think of those freedoms and opportunities that make you not only able to study in Dharma physically and mentally, but also make it accessible for you to meet teachers, to meet the teachings. You have faith in the teachings. There are followers of the teachings, and also the benefactors that contribute to certain activities with a sense of, you know, they're taking care of disciples with a sense of love and care. So that still exists. You know, amongst those 5 opportunities pertaining to others, they're still available to us. They still exist for us, and therefore we have freedoms and opportunities. So they're difficult to find because, first of all, pure ethical discipline which is the very basis, is hard. It's very difficult. So the question is, what is the meaning of perfect or pure ethical discipline? We had a bit of discussion today with Geshe about it, but to start finding out what it means, let's look at, first of all, what is ethical discipline. So I'm wondering if you have any input, if you think of what is the meaning of ethical discipline.
Well, it have to be based on the virtues, the 10 virtues, that all activities are within the all activities are generated within the attitude of the 10 virtues.
So all activities are generated in the form of the 10 virtues.
Yes.
So
and behaving in the 10 non-virtues is avoided.
And abstaining or avoiding the 10 non-virtues. So we have also some people sending answers here. Abstaining from the 10 non-virtues, 10 virtues, abiding by the 10 virtues actions, keeping vows, and the 6 perfections, of course, but with keeping vows. More?
What about negativity is something that harms other beings or yourself?
So negativity is something that harms other sentient being. Sorry? Or yourself. Actually, I can't remember coming across a definition of negativity, but we speak about negativity as a non-virtue. So a non-virtue is, the definition of non-virtue is that which issue forth a negative fruition, a black fruition, which means that you can look at that in terms of it brings about a lower or a miserable state of existence, but also it issue forth suffering for oneself. And then when you explain what are those actions that bring about suffering to oneself or a miserable state of existence, well, there are actions that harm oneself and harm others. So I would agree with you. So, so people are still adding some more answers. So motivation, purifying practices and prayers of aspiration, coolness. Carl, thank you very much, Jampa. the meaning of Shila, the coolness that puts out the heat of remorse from Chandakirti. Yeah, no, that's good, because actually this is one of the things I wanted to pull out. Steve-O is saying, taking up the vow of the Sugata's children. All right, so first of all, I wanted to begin with clarifying what ethical discipline is. What is the nature of ethical discipline? So indeed, as Jampa Carl pointed out, Chandakirti in his supplement to the Middle Way, but not only Chandakirti, also Lama Tsongkhapa in his Lamrim Chenmo speaks about the nature of ethical discipline. When we'll get to the 5th chapter in Shantideva's text, there will also be a brief presentation to the nature of each one of the perfections. And this is also the way that ethics is explained in that chapter. So I've made some, when I was pulling out different sources at home, I kind of put them in a file. So I'm just going to put them on my screen. I'm going to scream and put it on the screen. Where is it? Just a second. All right, so. All right, so in the illumination, it says, so illumination of the thought is Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary to Chandakirti's supplement to the Middle Way. So Lama Tsongkhapa explained Chandakirti's statement by saying, from the viewpoint of its entity, proper ethics has the character of 7 abandonments, abandoning the 7 faulty modes of body and speech, which means abandoning killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, divisive speech, hard speech, and senseless chatter. And then the motivators of 7 abandonments are non-covetousness, which is non-desire, non-harmfulness, which is non-hatred, and right view, which is freedom from wrong views. Therefore, in terms of its entities as well as its motivators, proper ethics is comprised of the 10 abandonments, the paths of wholesome actions, abandoning the paths of unwholesome actions. So it is very much in line with the answers that most of you, if not all of you, gave. To add to that also, Lama Tsongkhapa in his Lamrim Chenmo, 2nd volume in page 143 says, ethical discipline is an attitude of abstention that turns your mind away from harming others and from the sources of such harm. And a couple of pages after that, it says, moreover, such pure ethical discipline is based on the practice as prescribed of what to adopt and what to cast aside. So first of all, I think that we can get some sense of what the nature of ethical discipline is. It is an attitude of abstention. So we spoke, so in the illumination of the thought, we'll look at, Lama Tsongkhapa looked at what Chandakirti said. Chandakirti referred to the 10 non-virtues. Now the 10 non-virtues are divided into 3 non-virtues of body, which means 3 physical, 4 verbal, and 3 mental, right? So you have an abstention from physical and verbal actions, but you also have the motivations for that abstention. And the motivation is the motivation of non-attachment, non-hatred, and no wrong views. So altogether, the nature of, it seems that kind of, if we were to try to describe it in a general way, the nature of ethical discipline would be an attitude of abstention. So how do we link it up with vows? An attitude of abstention of the 10 non-virtues. Right here, it refers in both in Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chenmo and also his illumination of the thought. It speaks of an abstention from the 10 non-virtues. It says that that is based on what is prescribed by what we need to take up and what we need to cast aside. So how is it linked up with vows? Well, to begin with, this is actually quite, sometimes it can be quite, I think, a little bit confusing or a little bit murky. And I think that part of the murkiness in that topic is that when we think of the context of Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings and Shantideva's teaching, this is my way of thinking about it. I'm not sure that this is absolutely correct, but it seems that the target audience of these masters was primarily a community of monks, not community of lay people, but primarily a community of monks. So I'm guessing that some of the teachings were highlighting how one should behave in the context of one's monastic vows. Now, so for many of us, or actually now I'm a monk, so I don't include myself in that group, but I think that for many Western practitioners, and probably also not only Westerners, but also Asians in Tibetan society, more lay people now take up the study of the Dharma. Now, we start to think of how does it actually apply, how does this teaching apply to situations where you don't have a monastic vow? Well, first of all, in the first group of vows, the vow of personal liberation, which is called the Pratimoksha vow, there are groups of, sometimes it says 7 or 8 vows, right? So we have the 2 lay vow, lay men and lay women. These are 2. Then the 2 novices, so in Tibetan Getsul. So a Getsul Nan, Getsul Ma, and a Getsul Pa, right? A novice monk or a novice nun. Then we have fully ordained monks and fully ordained nuns, 6 altogether so far, right? On top of that, we have one-day vow, which is not much practiced in the Tibetan tradition. In the Tibetan tradition, rather than practicing a one-day vow as the Vinaya, we practice the 8 precepts, 8 Mahayana precepts. So I'm making the distinction because one-day vow within the context of Pratimoksha vows is a Hinayana vow. Right? It's a Hinayana vows, and the 8 Mahayana precepts are Mahayana practices. So they're based on this one-day vow, but the one-day vow is a Hinayana thing. It's different to the 8 Mahayana precepts. So that's the 7th. Now another one, the 8th one, is a particular vow to a nun in training that is in training for becoming a fully ordained nun. So it's called, that particular section in Tibetan is called Gelobma, right? Not Gelongma, Gelobma. So those are, let's say, the 8 vows. Now, there's no separate vow for abstaining from the 10 non-virtues. So it's not that you can think that I don't want to take the refuge vow. For the time being, I'm not going to take the refuge vow. I'm not going to become a monk. I'm not going to become a nun. But I'm still going to take the vow of abstaining from the 10 non-virtues. It doesn't exist as a separate vow. But you can decide that you're going to go for refuge, take the refuge vow, take the vow of approaching virtue, right, as a lay practitioner. So if you take that vow, the commitment that you make is you say that I'm going to go for refuge until my death to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. That's the nature of the vow. I'm going to go for refuge to the 3 until my death. And then you can also add to that abstaining from killing, stealing, intoxicants, lying, right? Those 5 things that lay practitioners can take up. Now, when you become a monastic, you also make a similar commitment, to guard the monastic vow for the rest of your life. But then to that, if you make that vow, you make that on the basis of also committing yourself to abstain from the 10 non-virtues. It's not that it is stated, but when you take one of those vows, then they're based on that attitude of abstention from the 10 non-virtues. They're not given as a separate vow. There's no separate vow for them, but it is more like the basis of the vows that we take within the Pratimoksha vow. So then, first of all, to be born just as a mere human being, just as a human being, we said that you need to guard one bit of ethical discipline. So I think that maybe this is my own interpretation. You can say that you pull out something from this ethics that abstains from the 10 non-virtues, and if you keep that within either the Buddhist tradition or also within the framework of other traditions or no tradition whatsoever, if you're totally secular, but you still, I think, trust that killing is bad, stealing is bad, those natural misdeeds are negative, that are negative by nature, and wholeheartedly you seek to avoid them, maybe you can take that to be cultivating ethical discipline that allows you to be born as a human being in future lives. I mean, I said maybe, probably it's still open to discussion. But then if you do it, and you can do it even more so, of course, if you follow a certain spiritual tradition, if you're kind of a devout Christian and you're a really ethical person, if you're a devout Muslim and you're an ethical person, I think that also Geshe-la mentioned that he thinks that if you do it properly, then you can also consider that to be ethical discipline of abstention. But even more so, kind of now when we contextualize it in the teachings of Lama Tsongkhapa and Shantideva and so forth, they spoke to a community of Buddhists, right? So they were not necessarily speaking about a community of non-Buddhists and how does it apply to them. So we just kind of need to think about it, I think, for ourselves and figure out how it works. But then the thing is, with perfect ethical discipline, it seems that the implication is that you, in teaching stuff we've got before, and also what Geshe-la said today, now we can get ethical discipline. We can take a vow in which the ethical discipline of abstention will be the foundation for the vow that we take. And to get perfect ethical discipline would mean to perfectly guard that vow. So I headed up with respect to that. Is that the only understanding of that? This is what I asked Geshe Jamyang, and he replied, it's already 4 o'clock. I wonder if I can steal 5 more minutes of your time and try to clarify that. People here give me a thumbs up. So if you guys at home find it unbearable, then you can listen to the recordings later. I'm just going to play Geshe Jamyang's answer. Sent me 6 messages, and not all of them are all right.
Oh,
she's all right.
Certain number of Jesus passed to Troshe. One of the Tom's Yassi. Certain number of Jesus Yaki. Majinando. Mugichu such a cigarette. The Tara who said it. This is the Mugitu to boom to Seattle. Mishiko, Tomaseski Yomare. Tenando Ranjiji Sojum Seattle.
So I think that altogether there are probably 5 or 6 minutes of answer hearing Geshe Jamyang's answer, but I listened to the beginning and maybe I'll listen to the rest of it later on. I don't want to keep everyone here, but what he said so far is that when we speak about the guarding pure ethical discipline as the very basis, he says it's the ethical discipline of abstaining from the 10 non-virtues, which don't have a special vow from them. It's more like just general ethics. You don't have to have a vow for that. I think that probably will elaborate on that later on, so maybe kind of there's more coming. But I think that going back to my original doubt, what's the meaning of guarding pure ethical discipline? Geshe Tsunrim said that he thinks that it has to be within the framework of not only guarding ethics that abstain from the 10 non-virtues, but also doing it on the basis of having vow.
That's what makes it pure.
Yeah, pure or perfect. In the context of having vow. It seems that Geshe Jamyang says that he thinks that you don't have to have a vow. If you purely abstain from that, that would be perfect. I mean, there's still much to listen to. I will do it later on, but also in Lama Tsongkhapa's, the second volume, is it the second volume or? Yeah, the second volume. In the second volume of his Lamrim Chema, when he speaks about the perfections in general, he says, I lost this. Sorry? Yeah, volume 2. I think I've lost this. I had it marked, but not 1/4. I think it came in introduction to, let's see. One, 4, 3. I had it marked and now I lost it. But anyway, there was a section that refers to guarding the meaning of guarding perfect ethical discipline. It's Lama Tsongkhapa kind of said there were a few references to having to guard ethical discipline, not only as the level of the Pratimoksha, but also as a Bodhisattva, but it says also in the context of mantra. And then it says also with respect to that, the meaning of perfect ethical discipline is to put a stop to the afflictions as soon as they arise. So it says that kind of, and I think that what Lama Tsongkhapa meant is that sometimes we have that, sometimes we have already an affliction operating in our mind, right? So we let, for example, attachment go on for 10 minutes, and we're kind of on the verge of taking what was not given to us. And after 10 minutes, we desist from doing that. We choose not to do that because it violates our ethics. That's good. But it seems that according to what Lama Tsongkhapa maybe meant with saying that you need to do it as soon as the afflictions arise, don't let them ruminate, don't let them hang around. You need to put a stop to them forcefully as soon as they arise, and knowing that they are disadvantageous for you. That's the meaning of pure ethical discipline. So not only are stopping those actions, but stopping those motivations forcefully as soon as they arise when you recognize how faulty they are. So that maybe brings up another point into the meaning of pure ethical discipline, right? Not only, so in order to have good ethical discipline, Geshe Jamin said before that, and maybe this is what he also wanted to say now. I'll wait with it for a few more minutes. So he said, before he said that not only you avoid negative actions, but when you find out that you have done a negative action, you purify it as soon as you can. You don't wait, but you purify it as soon as you can. Here, Lama Tsongkhapa says that not only that, even when you notice an affliction, you put a stop to it as soon as you notice it. So it seems that all those different explanations can amount to, like, I think, a general understanding of what it would mean for us, I think, because we want to apply it to us individually, personally, in a practice. What it mean to have perfect or pure ethical discipline? It's pretty hard, isn't it?
That would be in line with Lama Atisha.
That would be in line with Lama Atisha. Yeah, there's this famous story about Lama Atisha making his way from India to Tibet carrying a stupa with him, and kind of as soon as he noticed that he's done something non-virtuous or that there is a non-virtuous thought, he came down from his horse and purified his negativity in relation to the stupa. Yeah, so it's in line with Atisha, and I think that we can probably assume that Atisha had an immaculate, pure ethics. This is actually what is found also in the section that explains the greatness of the author, and explaining how his ethics was pure. Anyway, so apologize for keeping you for 10 more minutes. I will listen to the rest of Geshe Jamin's recording and let you know. I'll pass on the greetings. Thank you very much. So we'll leave it here for now. And it says that Kerry had a question. So I missed out on Kerry's question. Maybe we can, Kerry, if you still have that question, maybe bring it up at the beginning of tomorrow's session. Sorry. Otherwise, people might not be able to arrest anger and kill me. All right, so
amigos.
All right, dedication. This is not dedication. Just a second.
No.
All right.
Here we are.
You do the lama samyeju do achikya malu salago pasho make pana kyegyuchi kebanyam pa me pana gone gondo te wash awe kowe shinkandi pendande wa malujuwe chere siwan tenzingya tsoi shape site bado tengyuchi chan shin jang gong yang Enzi Kyompe We Kunzo Dopo Chosun Ko Wele Mundu Pada Sodo Gondu Shate Sho. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tomorrow.
Captain.
See you tomorrow.
You all tomorrow.
Be good.
Bye-bye.
Bye.